Hello, my name is Visgluigers and welcome to Armored Warfare, and today we'll be taking a look at the M551 Sheridan light tank. And it is an interesting vehicle. Now, I decided to make the review of the Sheridan because it recently kinda got buffed quite majorly. Because of the 0.13 patch, you can now one-shot kill people with the gun, which is pretty much the main feature of the Sheridan. And in my experience, it makes the tank just significantly stronger, at least in PvE. Not so much in PvP, but in PvE, the Sheridan was quite, well, I wouldn't say bad vehicle, but it has had huge flaws, and now it's quite much more well-rounded. But let's jump right into the statistics, and we'll be comparing the Sheridan to the BMD-1 and the BMP-1P. They are armored fighting vehicles, but they are the closest comparisons to the Sheridan, even though they are not the same class of vehicle. Beginning from the HP, the Sheridan is leading quite far with 1100 HP. Because it's a light tank, it's kinda to be expected, but the BMP-1P is not lacking far behind with its 1005 HP, but the Sheridan clearly has the edge over them. But when we move on to the armor parts, it's not that good news. You know, neither of the armored fighting vehicles have like any armor, and the Sheridan isn't that much better. I don't know how is it possible, but the upper plate of the Sheridan can actually give some trouble with autocannons, and some miracle heat bounces tend to happen. I don't know if the gun mantlet is a huge spaced armor part. I don't know, but personally, when I have engaged Sheridans, I do tend to have quite a lot of bounces, even though you wouldn't expect any, because the armor is just so thin on every single side, on the hull and the turret. So yeah. Now, but when we move to the mobility part, it is very interesting. The Sheridan has the best top speed limit of all these three vehicles of 70.2. The BMP-1P is the furthest of these three with only 54 km per hour only, it's pretty good still. And the BMD-1 has 66.8, so it's like almost as good. But where it really falls flat on its face is the acceleration. The Sheridan has by far the worst acceleration of all these three vehicles. It takes 5 seconds to accelerate from 0 to 32 kilometers per hour. It is a little bit painful, because you think of this vehicle as a really fast and agile tank, especially after playing the Scorpion, which is quite nimble vehicle. The Sheridan definitely isn't a speed demon. However, the BMD and BMP vehicles are. They have excellent acceleration of 2.1 seconds and 2.35 seconds, so these vehicles can shift. The Sheridan, not so much. You kinda have to plan ahead. It's more of a kind of medium tank style, if you're coming from World of Tanks, but it's like quite fast medium. But it's not like light tank. It's not very fast unless it's driving in a straight line. If you get the momentum going, it's gonna be fast, but it's gonna take quite a bit of time to build up that speed. Now, when we move on to the vision, you know, there's not big surprises. 385 meters of view range is the worst of all these three vehicles. The BMD and the BMP have both 425 meters of view range, and that of course can be buffed. So my view range is 425 meters when having Sabrina Washington as the commander. You can buff it up with retrofits, but I haven't done that. You might wanna do it, but more detail a bit later when we look at the gun. Now the camo value is okay, quite standard 0.24, which is okay, nothing special, but it's workable. Of course, the armored fighting vehicles have better, but not that much. The BMD has quite drastically better at 0.36, but the BMP, well, not that much better, but still, the Sheridan is the worst. Not big surprises there, cause it is not armored fighting vehicle, it is a light tank. It can afford to take one or two hits more because of the health advantage that it has. Now, the main meat of the vehicle, of course, is the gun, as mentioned. It is a 152mm gun, which is drastically bigger than on the armored fighting vehicles of the same tier. Now, of course, that means a huge alpha damage. Now, the gun does only fire heat, high explosive and anti-tank guided missiles, which is okay if you're engaging lower tier targets or tier 4 targets. When starting to engage tier 5 and 6 targets, you're gonna have major problems because a lot of vehicles start to have countermeasures against shaped charge ammunition, so your standard heat ammo is not gonna cut it anymore. The anti-tank guided missiles work a little bit better, but then you're gonna have a lot of time when you have to stay still to wait the priming time, and then the missile's velocity is very low, and so on and so on. You're just an easy target. So that is the biggest challenge of the Sheridan, in my opinion. But let's continue with the gun. So the heat damage is very, very high, 472, which is a lot higher than its opponents. The 361 and 324 damage per shot is quite drastically lower. But of course, that is balanced with the rate of fire. But before we take a look at the rate of fire, the penetration is hugely better on the Sheridan. It's over 100mm of penetration more on the Sheridan than in the BMD and BMP armored fighting vehicles. And that is a huge factor because you only have heat or shaped charge ammunition and the HE. You really need all that penetration, because something like a T-64 starts to have a ridiculously good amount of protection against shaped charge ammunition. So even when facing same tier main battle tanks, you're gonna start to have problems unless you hit weak spots and stuff like that. So yeah, over 300mm of penetration is okay, but it's not too good. Even comparing to the main battle tanks shaped charge ammunition, it is very workable. But the damage isn't absurdly high. 455 damage on the T-64. Well, and the Starship, which kind of plays the same role, has 534, which is quite drastically higher than the Sheridan's 472. Not a hugely better, but still very noticeably better. But of course the Starship is a very slow main battle tank, and the Sheridan is a very fast and nimble light tank. So yeah, take it as you will. But when we check out the rate of fire, we see that it is only 4.3 rounds per minute which means 13.94, which is technically 14 seconds of reloading every single time you press the trigger. Now, of course, you can beef that up. It's not necessarily that high, but it is quite long time to wait. Now, the Sheridan does have quite similar amount of reload time, but it can very easily take a couple of hits and shrug off damage. The Sheridan really can't. The Starship has a little bit better alpha damage, so, it feels a bit awkward in the Sheridan quite easily. And that is why the DPM of the Sheridan is not very good. Its DPM with its heat shells is just barely over 2000. It's 2030. And of course, you can buff that up a bit. I have 2374. But on base, it's 2030, which is over 1,000 lower than on the BMP and 1,200 lower than the BMD. So these two devils will really fast rip apart their opponents, while the Sheridan is more dependent on making couple big damaging rolls over a longer period of time. So you really need to be able to work around with that long reload, which is not great. But interestingly, the missiles are not that bad in comparison to the BMD and BMP variants. The missiles, 459 points of damage, which is just a sliver and better than the BMP, but 50 points of damage more than the BMD. Now if we check the penetration characteristics, it's quite similar case. The Sheridan is the best, but by a sliver. It's very similar kind of missiles than the armored fighting vehicles, even though the missiles are drastically bigger, which is quite odd in my opinion. And the reload times are very similar, which results in very poor DPM, only 1,317, which is really poor. The BMD and the BMP have very similar. The BMD has just a sliver over that, and the BMD has 100 lower. But what really makes a very big difference in that is that both of these vehicles have separate launchers for the missiles. The Sheridan uses the gun. You have to decide either to load the heat or the anti-tank guided missile to the gun, while as the armored fighting vehicles can load the heat and the missile at the same time. Of course you're gonna have 4 seconds of switching when you switch from your main gun to the missile, but when you shoot the missile it takes only a second or two to switch to your main gun, which means that you can very rapidly shoot the missile, and immediately when it hits the target you can already shoot your main gun and make 2 hits quite easily. And that is never happening in the Sheridan, ever. Which is quite big downside, although that kinda requires these two vehicles to be stealthy. If you are spotted, you don't have time for that, but if you are not spotted, you do have all the time in the world. But yeah, I don't know. It's very min-maxing of your situation, but in the Sheridan, you don't even have the option to do that. But let's move on to the gun handling. And after viewing the Starship, which had very surprisingly good accuracy, not that horribly bad aiming time, and pretty good turret reverse, when we look at the Sheridan, the turret reverse is the only thing that looks familiar. Cause the accuracy is just horrendous. It is god awful. On base, it is 0.27. 27. That is really, really big. Like, whoa. When you compare to the armored fighting vehicles, which have 0.12 and 0.14, the 0.14 isn't too good, but the 0.12 is accurate. It's like accurate, and the 0.14 is like, well, it's good enough. It's okay. Nothing super bad, but it's okay. It's workable. Very workable. 0.27? You really have to aim fully to even have a hope of hitting. If you don't aim in the Sheridan like fully, it's really like, you have to sacrifice something to the RNG gods in order to make a single hit. Cause the aiming circle is just that big. And of course, because you are very dependent on aiming, the aiming time is very long indeed. 4.6 seconds. I kid you not. I beefed it up to 3.5 and it's still painfully long. And when you compare it to like 2.8 seconds, 3.2 seconds. Hell, let's see some of the main battle tanks. Here we have 2.5 seconds. 3.3 seconds. It's just really long. It's really, really, really long. And you don't have that much camo. You either wanna go extremely close, which is very, 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 very dangerous, or you have to stay back and snipe, which is not very great, because the accuracy is just so incredibly poor. But at least the gun depression is workable. -8 degrees isn't too great, and the -4 is okay at the back, so it's kinda works okay-ish. Nothing to write home about, but it's workable, unlike the BMD and the BMP, which have only 4 and 3 degrees both. And that is just bad. You really have to constantly think about the gun depression and the places where you can shoot and engage enemies effectively. The Sheridan, not that much of a problem, but it's not great. So yeah, Sheridan, the gun is very, very ±0. I don't know, it's okay. It's got good things, it's got really bad things. It's very mixed bag. But that's enough theory and numbers. Let's see how it does in gameplay, so we'll have some kind of clue how it actually functions. Okay, and here we go. We are in a medium PvE mission in a little bit more open map, so that this replay will more like feature about the mobility and the ridgeline capabilities, a bit of the more long-range engagements. And the second replay will be more about close quarters combat. Now, right off the bat, you can see that when you have the Sheridan fully unlocked, it isn't slow tank. It isn't as fast as the armored fighting vehicles, but it is decently fast. It can feel a bit sluggish when going up hills or, really off-road, but really when you go down hills and on hard terrain, it's pretty good in the mobility wise. But now we see the gun depression that it's okay, but it could be better. I managed to make that shot because I stopped and the tank kind of leaned forward just for a second. But here I have to go much forward and really expose my tank in order to take down the opponents that are on the lower ground. Now we got to see the upgraded aiming time and accuracy, because in these kind of ranges it's not horrible. When you're engaging under 200 meters, it's not that bad. You're probably gonna be guaranteed a hit if you fully aim, but that's with the beefed up accuracy and the beefed up aiming time. Of course, another way of playing the Sheridan is that you don't really beef up the maximum accuracy and the aiming time, but rather upgrade the accuracy on the move, which is, I feel like, a very successful build that you can do. Personally, I wanted to go with the maximum accuracy and aiming time and a bit more like a sniper heavy build rather than very offensive up close and personal build. Now the view range isn't too great, so I can't kinda fully rely on spotting the enemies myself, but luckily we have a lot of armored fighting vehicles in our team, so it's not that big of a problem. Now I would very much like to shoot this guy. And there we go, wasn't quite fast enough. But this is, I feel like, where the Sheridan excels at, when it's accompanied by vehicles that are at least as fast as it is, and they are spotting for you, and you can just quickly snap your shot and pull back into cover, and have some decent range and have the window of opportunity to really leg it if you really need to. But of course, when making these shots, these finishing shots that, make 12 damage, as I just did, really feel very, 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 very awkward. You love to have those meaty, over 500 damaging shots. But as long as it's in PvE, it's kind of that way. But if you play PvP, yeah, you really just should take down as many opponents as you can, even though if you wouldn't do a full damage. But when we're facing these PvE opponents, it's a little bit different. But there we just a moment ago we saw the one shot that we did on I think it was the light tank, the German Panzer something. But that is the huge buff that was given pretty much. It is a overall buff, I feel like, to a lot of vehicles in PvE, but especially to the Starship and the Sheridan, that you are able to one-shot people. Because it was really odd that you couldn't, because it didn't make any sense. Your alpha damage is like 4.5 damage and the enemies has 150 hit points. Why can't I one-shot them? Now you can, which is absolutely fantastic. And that's the first game there. Nothing actually super amazing, but there should be coming the patch very, very soon that should have a replay system, and I should have a bit better replays to show you, because these are I don't have too much time, and I'll just record a couple of games and just take the best. When we get the 0.14 patch, which should have the replay actual replay system in place, the replays should go up in quality quite a bit. So I'm very keen myself waiting in that. But now we have a little bit more close combat based replay, because the ranges are a lot shorter. But really, I know these PvE games are not very representative of how the tank does in PvP, but I promise we'll have a lot more PvP footage after the 0.14 patch is live. But now back to the Sheridan. In this map, you can't go so much in a straight line, so in here you will kinda see the sluggish acceleration of the Sheridan. And here I believe I'm trying to turn left. That's why it was like lagging and nagging around. I was trying to turn left, but the map is a bit backed out and there was an invisible wall, which is another problem that the Armored Warfare has right now, I feel. And here we see that the acceleration isn't quite good enough to get out of the way, so we did get hit. And against bots in PvE, it's, annoying, but, we managed to take that main battle tank out without too much of a problem. Now in PvP, we would have been in deep shit. Really deep in it. But thankfully this map isn't too big, so we relatively easily can shift our approach to a different angle and take a couple of tanks while doing so. And that is something that is interesting in the Sheridan. The DPM is so bad that if there would have been more tanks capping, it's actually quite hard to disrupt the cap if there's multiple enemies, because you do have so ridiculously long reload that it makes it a bit, off. There we got a really nice run by and one shot. And then we have to wait and wait and wait for the reload and try to get this artillery. And there we go, one shot again. And that is really what the Sheridan is all about. You really want to make those huge connecting shots and preferably vanish before they can return their fire. And that is something that is a bit problematic in PvP. So I feel like you really need some good teammates to accompany you while you're driving in versus players, because you can't one-shot them almost ever unless they have taken a lot of damage already. So the Sheridan is kind of a late stage cleaner more. So perhaps trying to lay low at the beginning of the game and try to have some sniping opportunities, and at the end of the game just try to go for those run-bys and ambushes. I feel like that is something that the Sheridan really shines on, but it doesn't take damage too well because you don't have like any armor and you're not too nimble and fast. It's quite hard to dodge a bullet if you are surprised. I mean, if you know that that behind that corner there's an enemy and I'll build up speed and just surprise the enemy, it's not that big of a problem. But if you get surprised and you don't have a lot of speed already built up, that's gonna be a quite big problem. But here is kinda ideal situation where the allies are pinning the enemies down and I can take one shot and pull back to reload, and I don't have to be afraid that the enemy is gonna rush me. If the enemy is gonna rush you, you are dead, because your DPM is so bad. All of the, well, pretty much any vehicle is gonna just ruin your day really badly. But yeah, 11 kills, quite a lot of them was like kill stealing and so on. It was a medium difficulty, so yeah, there shouldn't be a lot of problems if you have even moderately good team. But hopefully this gave you some kinda idea on how the Sheridan functions. It's fast-ish, but it's not really at the level of like really fast vehicles like the armored fighting vehicles are. And the gun is, when it works, it's really good. But if you do miss, or if you don't quite have the damage to just take down your opponent with that single shot, you're in deep shit. Unless you can pull back to cover and just run away and stealth away. If you can't, just run and be stealth or not be detected at all, then it's all good. But if you are spotted and if you can't run and you can't hide, you will die unless there's a miracle luck with you and you just bounce off, or the enemy just keeps on missing. Because every single shot you make, the enemy takes so many shots at you, and you really can't take hits. You don't have the HP for it, you don't have the armor for it, and it's just gonna end up really badly for the Sheridan driver. So my personal feelings about the Sheridan, how did I feel, how I felt about it when I felt, and so on. It was okay when you got it fully upgraded. When you have level 1 crew, no retrofits, no engine upgrades, or not the best guns and so forth, it's very underperforming vehicle. But when you get it fully unlocked, you have fully beefed up it, you start to have a bit better crew on it, it's okay. It's quite okay vehicle. It's not bad, but it's none of my go-to vehicles when I just wanna have fun. I feel like the Scorpion is a bit more casual than the Sheridan, because the Scorpion is so incredibly fast, and it is very small in comparison to the Sheridan, so I guess it's a little bit easier to do well in. Although the Scorpion does fire only HE, so that can be a blessing and a curse, because you only have like one choice of ammunition, so you load the HE and that's it. In the Sheridan you kinda have a little bit more options, but very limited still. Sheridan is a tank that wasn't painful to go through. Well, I guess initially it was a bit painful, but when you get the key unlocks, it wasn't too painful to grind to the next vehicle. It was okay, but it's something that I haven't really ever gone back to. In exception of this review, it's okay vehicle, and yeah, I kinda liked it. It wasn't like any of my favorites or anything, but it was kinda nice. I feel like it's got its place. Maybe it could have just a little bit better rate of fire or accuracy, or maybe buff to the accuracy on the move or something. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it would have more retrofit slots so that you could more customize it to whatever you wanna play whatever role you want it to play as. Maybe that could do it a little bit more justice, but as it is as of now, it's okay, and at the end of the day, it is only a tier 4 vehicle, so yeah, it's okay, but I don't think no one will like really fall in love with the Sheridan and just play it to death. You know, someone might, but I don't think that's a very common vehicle. I feel like it's more of the armored fighting vehicles, like the XM1, like the XM800, whatever, tier 3 armored fighting vehicle, the really small one with the autocannon. That is something that a lot of people are probably going to fall in love with. The Sheridan, not so much. But I feel like that's all for the Sheridan as of today. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, pop a comment down below or just a thumbs up to let me know, and I hope I'll see you in the next video.